Video games have the capability of creating captivating and immersive stories, drawing players into their world like no medium can. However, the most powerful tool at their disposal for doing so is often left untapped by developers who fear the potential consequences of its misuse. I am talking about the choice-driven narrative. Why don't they fully embrace this unique storytelling mechanism and allow players to truly shape and mold their own gaming experience? The reason is because while utilizing this tool to its full potential could earn their game the title of Game of the Year, it can also lead to the downfall of even an extremely beloved franchise. The possibilities are endless, both good and bad. So, let's look into the potential of choice in video game storytelling together. While choice and narrative are powerful in video games, not all great experiences have to be choice-driven. There are many critically acclaimed games that offer very little in the way of player choice, yet still manage to captivate audiences. Games like God of War, The Last of Us, and Journey are prime examples of this. Each one got Game of the Year, but have very little in the way of choices while playing through the game. But even in these seemingly choiceless games, there are still subtle ways in which the player can shape their own experience. Take The Last of Us, for example. The game was recently adapted into a TV series by HBO, but there's a key difference between these two mediums. When you watch the TV show, your experience is the same as every other viewer's. When you play the game, your experience can be vastly different from someone else's due to the minor choices you make throughout your playthrough. Things like whether to play very aggressively or very stealthily, what you use your resources to make, and so on. These small choices will make each player's experience differ, even though no one would consider The Last of Us a choice-driven narrative. Similarly, in God of War, the choices you make regarding upgrades, fighting style, and exploration can greatly affect how you perceive the main character, Kratos, in the story. Books and movies do not have this benefit. While not everyone will view characters the same way in a movie due to their own personal experiences, how someone views a character in video games is much more reliant on who the player is as a person, as most of the character's actions are a direct result of the player's choices, however small. This means that even in the most choice-limited games, there are still choices that the player can make that heavily affect their experience. And I believe that the bigger the effects of the choices, the better the game feels to play. So, while these subtle choices in choiceless games add depth and personalization to the experience, the truly narrative-altering choices in choice-driven games fundamentally shape the experience, and when executed properly, can lead to a truly memorable and meaningful experience. Now, it may differ from person to person, but I find it hard to recall games that have truly left a lasting impression on me that lacked player choice. On the other hand, when it comes to choice-driven games, several titles come to mind, and for good reason. And that reason is not because erotic visual novels almost all happen to be choice-driven games, although it doesn't hurt. Choice-driven narrative game stories have stayed with me throughout my life because I actively participated in shaping the story through my decisions. Take one of my favorite games of all time, Dragon Age Origins, as an example. From character creation to end credits, I made hundreds of decisions, big and small, that greatly impacted the outcome of the story. These choices go well beyond the basic ones that choiceless games have, like upgrading skills and deciding which item to use. They include narrative-defining decisions like choosing a ruler of a land twice, deciding the fate of rogue mages, and whether or not I can condemn my child to be a catalyst to an ancient god, or sacrifice my own life to spare him and save the lives of others. These choices the game leaves up to the player make the game personal and unique to each individual, and it's why I think the game is so good. However, there exist playthroughs that I would despise playing, so even though I would not enjoy every playthrough, I give the game the title of masterpiece, specifically because of the playthrough that I personally crafted for me. While choice in video games can create a personalized and unique experience for the player, they can also add depth and complexity to the story. Let's use The Last of Us again as an example. In the game's ending, the main character Joel must choose either saving a young girl that he and the player have developed strong affection for, or saving all of humanity. Joel chose to save the girl, and his decision was a heavily debated topic among players. Although at the time, many believed that sacrificing the girl would not guarantee the survival of humanity. The game's director later revealed that it would have in fact led to a cure for the infection that had caused the apocalypse. With this knowledge, we can imagine an alternate universe where players could actually choose one of the two outcomes. While I think most players would have made the same choice as Joel, just the choice being in their hands would have added a layer of moral complexity to the game, reinforcing their bond with the characters and making the game's story even more impactful and memorable. This is a single choice added to a game that could greatly increase the impact of the experience. Now, some people might disagree and think that adding that extra choice would cheapen both of them, but I actually think the opposite. I think when you have a choice in a game that makes a player desperately want to see each outcome, it makes the game twice as good as having only one interesting outcome. In fact, I remember playing a game where I couldn't help but replay it multiple times, just to see how different my choices would change the outcome of the story, and it made the game even more enjoyable for me. As a teen, I spent hundreds of hours playing the Mass Effect series, and I found that Mass Effect 2 kept me coming back time and time again. The series as a whole is full of memorable choices that shape the story for anyone who plays it. But for me, there were dozens of choices that I couldn't help but want to see the ripple effects of throughout the story. I was so meticulous about it. I used to have a paper that had all of the save file numbers on it and all the choices I made in that save file. By the time Mass Effect 3 was released, I had hundreds of completed Mass Effect 2 save files. To put into perspective how much time I invested in the choices of Mass Effect 1 and 2, know that for every playthrough, I made sure to do all side content 100%. Out of the many choices in Mass Effect 1, there were 5 choices I valued the most: who lives and dies between Ashley and Kaidan, whether or not to save the Rachni Queen, whether or not to save the Council, who to put on the Council for humanity, who to date, Liara, Ashley, or no one.
I'm too sexy for your party, too sexy for your party, no way I'm disco dancing.
That means I've played through Mass Effect 1 48 times. And these are just the choices I cared about the most. There are other teammates that can die, other enemies you can choose to kill or spare, but I only cared about these 5 choices enough to start a new save for each one. Each one of these 48 files was then used in Mass Effect 2. Yes, I used each one of the 48 in Mass Effect 2. And again, I made more choices I wanted to see the repercussions of. By the time Mass Effect 3 came out, I had over 200 save files ready to play for the final game in the series. However, as much as I loved making each and every one of these choices in Mass Effect 2, I loved them because I was ready to see how each and every choice affected what I was expecting to be the most amazing ending to a franchise anyone could have ever imagined. And unfortunately, expectations like these can crush even the strongest franchise. Expectations that arise from choice-driven games is really the first major drawback to those games. The branching paths increase excitement to the point where expectations can get set to unrealistic levels. Expectations like these can end up leading to major disappointment and even the destruction of a franchise. The Mass Effect series is the prime example of this, with players having such high expectations for the conclusion of the trilogy in Mass Effect 3 that when it did not live up to those expectations, it led to one of the strongest negative reactions in gaming history and even damaged the reputation of the entire franchise. This unfortunately served as a cautionary tale for game developers, and it's why no game franchise like Mass Effect has been made since. And the reason stems from the Diamond Theory. The Diamond Theory is a concept used specifically in video game development that relates choices in a game to a diamond. There are actually 3 separate diamond theories, and I'm going to go over all of them. It's important to understand them because they are principles many game developers listen to when creating games, whether or not you think they're accurate. The first refers to the standard diamond shape. Choices in video games need to be structured in a way that all 4 points of the diamond are equally represented. These points are player agency, player investment, player experience, and player outcome. If you ignore any one of these points when making the player make a choice, the choice is then less valuable. If you remove agency from the choice, then players don't feel like they are the ones making the choice at all. If you remove investment, then the player doesn't feel like there's any reason to make the choice. If you remove player experience, you're making players feel nothing when they are making the choice. Finally, if you remove the outcome, what was even the point of giving them a choice at all? When all 4 points of the diamond are perfectly aligned, it makes the diamond more valuable, and thereby making the choice the diamond represents more valuable. The second diamond theory relates the choice in the game to a diamond's most valuable feature, its sparkle. Just like how diamonds have multiple facets that make it look shiny and beautiful, the theory suggests that a good game should have multiple choices that are unique and change the game in different ways. The more choices a game has, the more fun and interesting it will be. Similar to how a diamond with more facets or sides is more valuable and attractive. However, it's important to note that adding too many choices can become difficult to do and may take away from the importance of other choices in the game. If taken to the extreme, it could result in a game with too many insignificant choices. Now you may ask, how can the second theory say that there will be too many insignificant choices if you follow the first diamond theory? Well, the Mass Effect franchise is the perfect representation of following the first two diamond theories, and it's why many companies have been wary of such choice-based games, and why the third diamond theory, which explains the issue Mass Effect ran into, was created. The third diamond theory explains that as the player progresses through the game, the choices they make will become increasingly complex and diverse. The game starts at the base of the diamond here, where the choices are simple and straightforward. As the player continues to make choices, the diamond expands, and the two edges represent the extremes of all possible choices. Think absolute good and absolute evil for simplicity's sake. They are countless branching paths between the two edges, but the edges themselves represent the boundaries for all choices that can be made. As the edges of the diamond move further apart, the number of possible choices in the game increases. However, there comes a point where the two edges of the diamond are at their farthest apart. This point represents the diversity in playthroughs the fanbase has had up until this point, but it's also the point where the game needs to start wrapping up, and the edges of the diamond start to come back together. In the case of Mass Effect series, this point is the end of Mass Effect 2. Looking ahead to Mass Effect 3, we can see how following the first two diamond theories can lead to a problem. Diamonds rarely end at the point where they are the furthest apart. They often come together to become much closer before having a flat edge. The top of the diamond represents the end of the story and the resolution of the player's choices. Players expect their choices to keep branching until the end of the game, but the reality is that they often end up more similar than different. This is what led to the disappointment and negative reaction from the fanbase in Mass Effect 3. The series went from Mass Effect 2 being one of the world's most beloved games to Mass Effect 3 being one of the world's most hated games. This served as a warning to game developers that choices in games can bring you straight to the top, but the burden of that makes it near impossible to please everyone and can destroy your franchise. With these theories in mind, we can delve deeper into the reason why the diamond theories held true in game development. It's important to understand that with an increase in the number of choices and branches, the resources required to create and maintain them also increase. This includes writing dialogue, developing unique character interactions, and creating different outcomes for each decision to ensure that each choice aligns with the principles of the first diamond theory. Game developers must ensure that the lead up and aftermath of each choice feels natural, that the character's actions, personality, and knowledge of events stay consistent throughout the game, which is a daunting task for developers to ensure for every single player interaction. For instance, if the player has the option to meet a character and then have them join their party, but chooses not to, then every single interaction they have in the game must have an alternate version where the character is not present. This means that each piece of dialogue must be written in a way that doesn't rely on that character being there. And this happens often when a new party member is obtained through DLC. Similarly, if a character has the potential to die in the story, they're almost always either written off quickly or take a significantly smaller role in the rest of the story, because keeping them around often doubles the amount of work for the writers, and each choice like this adds more branching paths that also need to be maintained. As resources are limited, it can be challenging for game developers to offer players a wide range of complex branching paths without compromising the quality of the overall storyline or other aspects of the game. This is why the diamond theory serves as a guide for game developers to balance the number of choices and branches in the game with the resources at their disposal. Although it is possible to create games that defy one or more of the diamond theories, these games often fall into one of three categories. They are short, they have abrupt endings for certain branches, or are primarily focused on making choices, like a visual novel. While this has been the case for a very long time, game developers have continued to push the boundaries of choice-driven games, and it's important to remember that the diamond theories are not hard limitations, but a guide for creating enjoyable and fulfilling player experiences based on the limitations of game development. but limitations are meant to be broken. While the past has left many game developers with apprehension about creating a franchise as choice-driven as Mass Effect, I believe the future of choice-driven games is promising. With advancements in technology and a deeper understanding of player psychology, we can expect to see even more complex and diverse choices in future games. I mean, it's not hard to envision even indie developers will be able to manage extremely choice-rich games. Tools like Twine and Inklewriter have become popular choices among game developers for branching narrative storyboarding, and they are becoming more sophisticated and user-friendly with each passing year. Additionally, with advancements in artificial intelligence, we can expect to see more immersive and diverse choices in games in the next 5 to 10 years. AI is now capable of tasks that were once thought impossible outside of science fiction, such as creating thousands of high-quality pieces of art every day. The legality and ethics of these advancements are complex and best left to experts, but it's impossible to ignore the potential for AI to revolutionize game development. Even small teams of developers could use AI to manage an ever-expanding storyline with hundreds of impactful choices without sacrificing story coherence or choice importance. Tasks that would have taken a large team of people years to complete without it. If this sounds foreign to you, or you think story that an AI generated would suck, I'm not necessarily talking about AI generated stories, I'm talking about AI assisted story development. For example, let's say that I create a game. You're a boy and you have your two friends that you go around the neighborhood ringing doorbells. Friend A and friend B know different people and can help you have in-depth conversations with each person that you ring the doorbell of. At the end of the game, you put together all the information you learned and you submit it to your teacher. Let's say it was like an assignment or something. Maybe it's not a very good game, but that's not the point. Now, I, the developer, decide to go back and add a branching path from the start. If you don't help friend A clean up his room before you go, halfway through his mom finds him, spanks his ass, and he gets grounded. Now, everything after that halfway point needs to be changed. That's where the AI comes in. It can now auto-generate a full path after this key moment where friend A is not there. And all a developer needs to do is go through that dialogue and make sure everything fits the story. This is a basic example, and I wouldn't be surprised if someone could do this with AI today. But imagine instead if you had a Mass Effect level of story web. Think of what Mass Effect team could do with such a tool. A lot of the effort went into making sure each piece of information in the Mass Effect trilogy was not forgotten at any point. A lot of resources were spent on making sure there were no logical discrepancies, writing, rewriting, and rewriting different branching dialogue paths just because Shepard accidentally punched the wrong person in the first game. These are resources spent on the story that could have been spent somewhere else. Even more importantly than money, time was spent on this, and time is something that cannot easily be bought. Even if different authors were writing for different branches, they still had to communicate with one another about what they wrote in some way, which means that there was a finite amount of story that the team of developers could write based on the time they had. To have more story, they needed more time or a way to write story faster, and that's where AI comes in. I remember reading a book as a child called The Heir Apparent, which was about a girl who plays a virtual reality game where she's the heir to the throne of the late king and must compete with her three brothers to claim the title. The idea was that she must survive until the end of the game to achieve victory condition. And she had absolute power to do anything she wanted, make any choices she wanted. And while the story capabilities of the game in the book far surpasses anything currently available, how long will it be before games can account for an infinite number of player actions? With the help of an AI story companion, how long will it be before indie teams can create some of the most intricate and compelling stories players have ever seen? Technological advancements are not the only aspect of choice-driven narratives that have progressed either. While no franchise on the level of Mass Effect has been released recently, several games with deep and meaningful choices have been created. Games like Disco Elysium, which utilize a unique skill system to give players access to helpful hints and extra dialogue options, have pushed the boundaries of what is possible in terms of player agency and storytelling. It's worth noting that other games like Detroit Become Human, Telltale Games, and the Witcher series has also made a mark on the industry by providing unique and captivating player choices. One non-technological advancement that BioWare gleaned from the Mass Effect series is the realization that choices can greatly impact the story without having to be directly involved in the current plotline. As previously mentioned, in Dragon Age Origins, players are presented with a variety of choices that have significant effects on the story, similar to Mass Effect. However, in Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition, players take on the role of new heroes who encounter characters affected by the choices made by the previous heroes, and learn how those choices have shaped the world. This approach highlights how game developers are gaining a deeper understanding of player psychology and utilizing this understanding to create a more meaningful and immersive player experience. By weaving the player's first adventure into the legends of the world, they have created a sense of continuity between the games, allowing players to feel that their choices have real consequences and that they are shaping the world around them. This approach requires minimal effort on the part of the development team, but the maximum impact on the player experience. However, even though BioWare was able to succeed in creating a complex and interconnected world with Dragon Age when they came up short with Mass Effect 3, it was supported by their large budget and resources. Building a world with robust lore, deep characters, interconnected political systems, and a wide range of choices is a difficult task, especially for smaller teams with limited resources. As the understanding of player psychology continues to advance, choice-driven narratives in video games have the potential to create truly captivating and immersive stories that allow players to shape and mold their gaming experiences without disappointing fans at the end. The challenges of creating choice-driven games, such as limitations imposed by resources and the diamond theories, should not be overlooked. It is important to remember that the diamond theories are not hard limitations, but rather guidelines for creating enjoyable and fulfilling player experiences. Advancements in technology are helping developers create these types of games with smaller teams. The future of choice-driven games is bright, and we can expect to see even more complex and diverse choices in the games of the future. The possibilities are endless, and as developers continue to push the boundaries of what is possible, we can look forward to even more immersive and impactful gaming experiences. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe AI won't get integrated into video games this way, and it'll be another 20 or 30 years before we see another game like Mass Effect 2 take the world by storm. I'd love to hear what you think, so leave a comment down below with your thoughts. But no matter how long it takes, at least we'll always have the erotic visual novel genre. Bye-bye.